Okay, well, I suppose like a lot of kids around, you'd start on tin whistle first. So I started, actually, my first whistle teacher was Martin Donoghue from Ballantyne, and he used to teach up in Chaheen in the hall there. And then after I was going to Martin, Bernie, his daughter Bernie Geraghty, took over from him. So I started going to Bernie, and I was doing, I tried every sort of instrument. I went to Bernie, and also for a while then she wasn't teaching, Marion Egan was teaching in Claremorris. So when I was with Marion, I was doing whistle and flute, and I didn't really take very well to the flute. And then I was trying the fiddle, and I didn't like the fiddle. And then one year we were down at the Willie Clancy Week, and we went to the concertina recital. Actually, I think before going to the recital, we heard two girls playing the concertina in the street, and I was like, that's what I want to play. So I was, I think, 10 around the time. Fair play to my parents. They were like, okay, if that's what you want to play. So they got a concertina for me, and then I started going to Bernie Geraghty with the concertina. And that was, as far as I was concerned, that was my instrument then. I just thought like that was me sorted. And then when I was about 14, again at the Willie Clancy Week, there used to be a little shop there, on the main street, and there was a little harp in the window, and my sister, who was 7 at the time, every time we'd walk past, she'd be like, I want a harp. And we were all kind of like, what are you talking about, and eventually then at the same festival, they always have, up at the hall, they'd always have all these brochures out about other festivals. And my dad saw this brochure of a summer school by Janet Harbison up in Glencullen-Kill, and it was happening maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and it said on it, like, the big kind of attraction was like, come and try the harp, like rent a harp for the week kind of thing. So like at the time we had a caravan, so we had nothing else to do during the summer, like, oh great, Dad's right, we'll go up there. And we were driving up, that road out past Killybags with the caravan, we were arriving late, like, and myself and my other sister, we were the teenagers, we were like, why do we have to go here? Like, who wants to learn the harp, And we arrived in then late into the room of about like 40 harps all laid out and already in the middle of a tune. And Janet was just like, that's your harps over there. And I'm not joking, after the first 5 minutes I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And I was hooked then from that. And at the end of the week we arrived home with the harp. Jeez. So that was how we got started. But it's so funny because people are always saying, did you always dream of playing the harp? And I'm like, no. I really didn't. And it's funny because like the harp, even though obviously like Leisha Kelly in Mayo was a fantastic harp player, but like at the time that I started, I'd never heard anyone playing the harp, which is kind of, well, it's not, I suppose even still it's not that common, but like it's sort of hard to believe that you'd get through like 14 years of going to FLAS and stuff like that and still never have been kind of aware of it or taken any notice of it. And even my dad, like, all the image he had in his head was kind of Mary O'Hara, that kind of singing and accompaniment style, which is obviously perfectly fine, except he knew I wasn't really a great singer, so he was probably thinking this is just not going to work, But so that was how we got started, and then from then, like, I was still doing concertina, and I had done piano as well, like up along, like classical, which was definitely a help actually coming to the harp at that age, but it was the best incentive, like being in a class with a bunch of 7-year-olds, when you're 14. I was like, okay, next year I'm going to be in the advanced class, and so I just started practicing, and that was me. But so then after that, Janet Harbison was the one who ran the summer school, so every month she'd hold a workshop in different places like Glencullen-Kill or Dublin or Monaghan or
Belfast. She lived in Ireland?
Yeah, she was living in Belfast at the time.
Was she? Alright, okay.
Yeah.
I thought she was in Alright, okay.
So
she'd pop over to Donegal or wherever to
do like, say, a weekend once a month. So we used to go up to those weekends, and that was kind of how I learned then from Janet at those weekends. And then she also had the Belfast Harp Orchestra, so that was set up then in 1992, and then I became a member of that, and that really kind of, I suppose, was what opened my eyes to a world of like doing concerts and all that kind of stuff, and touring. Like, we went to Germany and toured all over England and France, and we went to New York. We actually played in Carnegie Hall at one stage with the Chieftains, which I'd probably never be back there myself, but it was like, it was just fantastic. At that age, like when you're 16 or 17, to see these places and get this idea of like, wow, like, to be honest, I'd say meeting Janet had such big influence in terms of opening a world of like performance and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, because my dad's story himself, like he grew up in Birmingham, and he didn't have any music, even though his mother is from just over the road in Carnacon, but he had no music or anything. But he came over here in his early 20s, and his uncle, I think it was, had a fiddle that was just in pieces. And so when he came over, he thought, right, might as well, I'm here for the year now, I might as well do something Irish. So he just thought he was coming for a year, like. So he glued this fiddle together with like, you know, not a proper job at all. And then he started asking around, like, who's the best fiddle player around?
Oh my God.
And somebody said to him, oh, Fred Finn is the best. So he was like, right. Off he goes up to Fred Finn.
Wow.
To say, you know, will you teach me the fiddle? So he like, Fred kind of didn't teach him as such, but he kind of played a tune, and, you know, Dad was learning along, and then he was teaching over in Ballinafad, and I think there was Frank Barton, and there was a few different people over there. So he kind of, like, in his 20s had got really involved in the music himself, and I suppose it was because of that, and not having done it as a child, that they were so
really
keen for us to be, you know, and they weren't at the same time, like, not in a competitive way, like, but just in a sort of fun, let's just do this and enjoy this, like, and going to the festivals, like, that would be the highlight of our summer, you know, going down to the Willie Clancy Reek or these places and meet all your friends, and like that was, you know.
And you mentioned your sister. Would she have an equal love of this music, even still now? Like, would she have gone on like you?
She went on like she played like a lot, like as a teenager, and she would have been, you know, done the Colts tours and all that kind of stuff. But then she ended up going to do medicine at college, and so you can imagine there wasn't too much time for the harp in the background. But it's funny still, like if she, you know, she has her harp taken off now with her to her house, but before that, when she was in an apartment, she'd no space for it. Every so often she'd be here and she'd just sit down, play a tune, like it'd be as if she never stopped playing, you know, that kind
That's
of way.
Lovely,
like,
yeah. So her interest was still there for her.
Oh, it's still there, yeah, but she's no time now.
Of course, no, she's.
Yeah.
What age were you around this stage when you were doing these tours and stuff?
I was, probably 16, 17.
Okay, so you're still a kind of a teenager.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the trip to Carnegie Hall was actually when I was supposed to be doing my leaving cert at St. Patrick's Day. Like, looking back, I've been laughing, thinking, how did I, you know, nobody try and stop me, you know. But yeah, so that was in the leaving cert year, and then I ended up going to college at Queen's in Belfast. Okay. So then obviously I was still kind of working with Janet. And later on then, in about 1996, I was invited, I started off, Janet was meant to teach at a festival in France and she couldn't make it, so I was filling in for her. When I was there, I met a German harp player who invited me on a tour of Germany, like a 5-week tour. And that was kind of a start then really in terms of doing solo stuff. And around the same time I met an American harp player actually over at Scoil. She was just in the class, and she we were just chatting, and she borrowed a harp for the competition, and then she was kind of sending a thank you email, and she just sort of said, have you any plans to come to the States? I had just been polite, kind of wrote back and said, no, but I'd love to go sometime. And the same woman, Kathy D'Angelo is her name, she's so much get up and go about, and she literally wrote back and said, okay, like, when do you want to come? And she set up a tour for me, and that was like the first thing I went. After that, that was 97. I'd been over and back a couple of times every year since then. And she did all the organising, like, you know, so it was fantastic. I think it was just, I suppose I appreciate so much just having met a particular person at a particular stage in your life can set you on a totally different path. Of course. You know?
Yeah.
Because as well, like, she played the fiddle and stuff like that before the harp, and she was kind of really into Irish music. But there wasn't really much like teaching by ear or stuff like that in America. So when she came over to Ireland and took the class, like in Scoil, which was all teaching by ear, she just thought this was, you know, she wanted to introduce it to other people, I suppose, then. So so that was how I got started with that. But I think, like, even all the travelling and stuff, it's still really important to keep the kind of connection with being grounded, you know, at home and stuff like that. In between doing the tours, so I was doing those kind of odd like tours that I was asked on and kind of enjoying it. And then the German harp player, he also worked with a record label over there, and they were like basically offered to take on a recording, you know, if I wanted to do a CD. So I thought, of course at the time I just didn't even think about, you know, now you'd be thinking, what's the contract and all this stuff. I was just like, oh great, I'll do anything, like, you know. So So they asked me to do a recording, and at the same time, like I was doing an MA at college in Belfast again, and then I did the HDip down in Limerick, or the grad dip in education, music education, because I wasn't planning like a career in music. I was just thinking, this is great fun, doing these odd tours. And so I did the recording, and then I was still doing little bits and pieces of playing and teaching as well. But in the course of, I did the HDip, or grad dip, sorry, and even though like I did it, I have never actually used it now really since, but at the same time I felt like I wanted to do it. And I'm glad that I did, because I even learned a lot that I've used in my harp teaching, you know, in terms of like teaching methodology and how people learn and all that kind of stuff. So it was useful, definitely. But it was also very hard work for the year, like a lot of all the lesson plans and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So after that, I was going back to Queen's. I was starting a PhD there. I was going to do research on like the Bunting collection and of course the harp collection. The manuscripts are in Queen's, and so I wanted to do something on that side of things. But after about 6 months, I just felt like I was kind of shut in the library and working away, and I was just thinking, you know, I just need a break. Initially, I just thought I needed a break. And so I thought I'd take off 6 months and I'll go touring and try and do more touring and see about all that. And then I suppose I got a taste for it then, and I just never ended up going back to the PhD.
Wow.
I just went. I ended up saying, okay, that's it, and I just started doing more tours. And,
wow. Okay. So it took you away from that part of it.
Yeah, it did. And sometimes, occasionally, I think, oh, you know, I'd have had it well done by now. Like that was 20 years ago. But at the same time, it was just, I suppose, I just felt it was just too isolating, and I just wanted to be out. And to be honest, I've never said like I should have done it. Because like I think the road I did go down definitely was the right one for me. Like you know, and it was, you know, all the touring and everything. Like I just have met so many fantastic people, and it's been such a fantastic experience. So I wouldn't actually change it. But you know, occasionally I think I wonder where I'd be now if I had done it.
Of course, hindsight's a great thing. Yeah.
But we were actually on tour over in the US in March and had to come back in a panic in the middle of the lockdown, you know. But so still, obviously, the main thing, like up until, I suppose, my daughter is 9, so before she was born, like I would have been travelling a lot more. But even actually, because my husband plays as well, so we would have toured together.
Right, very good. Yeah.
So really, up until she started school, we were still touring. Like we'd still have gone to America about 3 times a year. And brought the kids with us, like, you know.
Fantastic.
But obviously then going to school, that kind of changed the scenario a bit. So then what we ended up doing, since she's been at school, is like he'd do a solo tour usually in September, which he should have been there now as well. Then I usually would do a tour with a show, Irish Christmas in America, you know, Slushing Up Dermot, and that's been going on for about 15 years, I think. I only missed one, and that was when Liam was a baby. But so that would be in December, and then around Easter or St. Patrick's Day, kind of coinciding with the school holidays, we would have gone, all of us, and just taken the kids out for that extra, you know, week or whatever. So then you'd get 3 weeks, you know. And in the summer then we'd go back. There's a couple of festivals we always teach at up until this year. So that this was the first year now in a long time that we weren't over there.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Your husband plays well. Where's he from?
Well, he's from Glasgow originally, and he used to play with the band Ossian in Scotland. But he's now mostly harp. But he did play other various things before. But when we play together, we do like harp duet stuff, and then he also plays whistle and bouzouki.
Okay.
And I do some concertinas. So
So you blend it up. Yeah. Growing up, you're playing from the age of 6, 7.
Yeah.
Something like whistle, and so you're introduced to music at a very young age. And you mentioned being taught over by Martin Donahue. Of course, who was a massive character in this county.
Oh yeah.
Did you remember any other kind of musical characters or heroes that you'd have met over the years, or that would stand out to you?
Well, definitely like within Mayo, like Joe Byrne. It's a huge
character.
I mean, and he's so many interesting stories and the folklore and everything. Like it's not just the tune; it's the whole story behind it. And even like I was involved in that Mayo 5000. You know, at the time, what year was that? I think it might have been in Leaving Cert. Was it like 93 or something like that?
Was it really back that far? I was going to say 2000. Was it really?
Oh no, it was way
93?
back. Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 93, because I was still in school here, so it was either 92, 93, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was involved in some concerts with that, and actually through that, because Joe had collected a lot of Mayo music, and it was kind of that really that started me being interested in sort of local tunes and local sources and all that kind of thing. And one of the CDs that I did, the second one I did, I kind of picked a lot of Mayo stuff on that one, just because they're such great tunes, like there'd be tunes like from, you know, John McHugh now even as well. I remember himself and Kevin did a concert in the library in Claremorris. You know, they had this Connan Gael, there was this concert series, and they've had fantastic concerts there. But like, I remember John and Kevin, they played so many great tunes, and I'm sure I had like a cassette recorder or something at the time, recording it. I think it was back in the days still of cassettes, and like I learned lots of great tunes from them there, you know. So definitely Joe Byrne, and like I vaguely remember meeting Fred Finn when I was very young. My dad took us down to see him, you know. He was still kind of influenced by him, like, and Dad would have known, like, from going to all these sessions, like Jimmy Murray and
of course,
Paddy Mills. I met him a couple of times, but he was quite a character as
he
well.
Was a character, yeah.
So that would be a lot of the kind of, you know, but definitely Joe Byrne is so influential.
He is, and he knows his history. He knows the relevance of the tune to an area, and I think that's the idea of this project, is to focus on this, like the music that you said you recorded. There's so many great tunes, like there are, and some of them are claimed are not really associated with this county, and sometimes it kind of gets the
I just think there's someone else actually as well. It's supposed to be Paddy Joe Ty.
Oh, very good.
Now, I mean, I don't know him personally as such. I've met him like a couple of times, but I remember we used to be involved in like Scoring and Oak and this kind of stuff. And Paddy Joe used to be playing for the Offmore set dancers, who were fantastic, and they won all those, you know. But like, we'd be going to these things, and every time he'd start to play, the whole audience would be like, you know, even people, you know, at those competitions, people wouldn't be half listening usually, like they'd be watching their own kids when they were participating or whatever. But when he'd start playing, everyone
his character,
it's just infectious, you know. Because even sometimes I'd be looking back through like the Bunting collection and stuff like that, which obviously that's so old, like if he was collecting tunes like over 200 years ago, all you have is the dots. But what I'm always thinking is, if you just try to bring it back to life as a tune, or even if you hear, sometimes you'll hear someone playing one of those tunes and you're like, oh, that's a really nice tune, and then you realise, I like looked at that and discarded it, like, you know, it didn't seem anything. But when you hear it, or depending on who's playing it and how they interpret it, they can give it a whole.
I suppose that's very difficult to bring it to that level of life then, because you don't know. We don't know we have some idea of this Bunting man of the collector, but we don't know anything about the people he scored from, so the players he'd have heard. So it would be nearly impossible to go that far to bring it to that level of life. How it should have been played at the time by
you can't. I mean, that's what, like, I used to be kind of, not obsessed, but I used to be really concerned with, like, how would they have played this. And then I kind of realised, you know, when we play like a jig or something, we don't worry about how people played it 200 years ago. And if the tunes hadn't died out, like, they wouldn't still be played the same now as they were back then. Like, tunes are changing all the time,
course,
you know. So then I started thinking, well, it's more important to just play the tune and not worry. And even as well, because the harps they played back then were like the wire strings, and they had a totally different playing technique. So it wouldn't have sounded the same anyway. Even if we played exactly what they played, it wouldn't even really work on the modern harps. So I'm going to just take the melody and try to.
And to be as honest as yourself, at the end of the day, it's you that's playing it. Like,
exactly.
You have to be realistic about it.
But it's interesting because actually in that Bunting collection, so he collected a lot of stuff in 1792 at the Belfast Harp Festival, and there was 10 harp players at that festival. 2 of them were from Mayo. There was a man called Charles Fanning. He was from Foxford. Now, he lived up in Cavan, and it said actually in the kind of information about him that his father also played the harp and was from Foxford. And then there was another man, Hugh Higgins, from Tiroli, which I think is a kind of
Crossmolina,
northeast, kind of Mayo, and he also played at that festival. And then Bunting collected tunes from. So, but if you think, like, 2 out of the 10 of them were from Mayo, you know, and that was quite a trek. Like, even if he was living in Cavan, you know.
No, it was a spin up to Belfast in
at the time,
late 1700s. It was quite a trek.
there was one other Bunting collected tunes from a man called Dominic O'Donnell, who was also from Foxford. So a lot of the tunes, like, he was at his festival, but then he also did like a tour in 1802. He came to Mayo and collected tunes from pipers and different people, singers and everything as well. So there's a lot of stuff, like, even though you wouldn't associate the Bunting collection as being anything to do with Mayo, really, on the surface, but then when you look at it, actually there's quite a number of Mayo tunes in it. But his overall collection, you see, his printed stuff is only about, I used to know the exact amount, but I think it's maybe a third or less even of the entire collection. Wow. So a lot of it is still just in manuscript form. But he definitely did a couple of tours, like in 1802 he definitely did a tour around Connacht, and he collected stuff in Westport and in Ballinrobe and Ballina and different places. But he, like, there's kind of interesting stuff with Bunting, like, he didn't speak Irish, so he had a man with him who was collecting the lyrics of the songs, but they later then had a falling out. So originally the plan was to connect the stuff together and publish it, but it never has been. But like, the collection of the songs is in Queen's University, and the music, but they've never been like reconnected. And they didn't travel quite together either. They were like maybe a couple of weeks apart, but they still went to the same places. They were all obviously following the same circuit. And it's just so to imagine like how he was doing that, like, you know, arriving into a place, like, would he just say, okay, tell me who sings here or who plays? The two that I mentioned went to the festival in Belfast. They know a little bit about them, like they know, like Hugh Higgins, for example. He was born in, I think, 1737, but he was supposed to be kind of from a more upper class background, so he was quite a sort of gentleman. He supposedly dressed very well and all this kind of stuff. And then Charles Fanning, who was from Foxford, there were a series of competitions in the 1780s, and he actually won those 3 competitions. He wasn't blind either. A lot of the harpers at the time were blind, so Charles Fanning wasn't, which is kind of unusual. And then the other man, Dominic O'Donnell, Bunting, he wasn't at the festival, but Bunting in different places in the collection, he says, from Mount Nathan, he said in one of them, and from Foxford, and then he said at Balahi, which is obviously over could be by Charlestown, or there could be another Balahi. But they don't really know anything more about him except that he was a source of these tunes, you know. So other than that, then, like in Mayo, sometimes it just says a singer. There's one character that's mentioned, I think it was a piper called Redmond Stanton, that he was in Westport. So, but I don't know anything. But then I was actually just thinking, because I was trying to refresh my memory about these characters today. No one, I was thinking, jeepers, when were they born and what were they? And I was just trying to refresh my memory, and I was thinking, jeepers, that would be a really interesting project. I mean, another connection, sorry, just before I forget it, was O'Carolan. Like, he would have come to Mayo at different occasions, but one of his main patron, Mrs. MacDermot Rowe, was from Turlock. She was Mary Fitzgerald was her name. So that was kind of a connection as well. But like, he would have been here. But I suppose the harp was very popular. Like, in Bunting's collection, there's a man called Arthur O'Neill, who was a blind harp player, and he dictated his memoirs. And it's so interesting to read, because he talks about, now I haven't read it with specific references to Mayo, which actually I will probably do now after this. I'll go back and have a look. But he talks about like all the houses, more or less, that you could go from house to house. You wouldn't even have to have a harp with you. That like they just had harps in the houses, and it was so popular. And like, over in like Roscommon now, like in Ballinagard, like the O'Connors, there was a lot of kind of, I suppose, kind of hubs of patronage, I suppose you could say. But I wonder, this zoning now, I don't know for sure, but I feel like maybe it would have been less influenced by, like, let's say, part of how the harp died out was the piano became so much more popular and kind of took over. But I wonder if it took a while to kind of filter to the west, like the way everything would come in Dublin first and kind of become really fashionable.
Of course, yeah.
So I don't know, it could also be that they were just kind of hadn't caught up to the fashions of not playing the harp yet. I mean, not among the musicians themselves, but like the harpers were relying on patronage from kind of upper middle classes, or upper classes, I suppose. And so once the piano became fashionable with them, even though they hadn't necessarily been playing the harp themselves, some of them did, but mostly, like, I think just their tastes were changing, and the fashions, like following the trends of European music and stuff. So
Yeah,
like it's hard to know exactly why the harp fell into such decline, but like that wire harp style kind of died out pretty much by 1840ish. Like that was sort of pretty much died out.
And what took its place?
Well, the harp started to bring in small gut-strung harps from Europe, and then John Egan in Dublin was making these portable harps. He actually designed a kind of a system like, do you know, on the Irish harp now you have a little lever on every string to change key, whereas on the pedal harp in classical music you'd have a pedal that changes all the C strings at the same time. So John Egan invented a kind of a hybrid where you had these little pins like on the front pillar, and you could turn the pin and that would change the C strings, we'll say. So that kind of, Thomas Moore would have been involved in that, and Thomas Moore's melodies were so fashionable as well.
Yeah.
And then up in kind of early 1900s, like the harp was becoming, it was mostly at that stage being associated as an accompaniment of singing. So it survived in that kind of mode, I suppose. And I don't really know about any particular connections to Mayo from that era.
How important was the stuff happening in Europe to this instrument, we'd say?
I'd say it wasn't important at all in the wire strum stuff. Okay. Like that was its own kind of self-contained thing, except in terms of influencing the patrons. Like, so say Carolyn now, he would have been influenced by Italian Baroque music because that was what his patrons were listening to, and you can really hear that influence in some of his tunes, you know. But I think once the wire strum harp died out, definitely they were following the fashions of Europe then with the harp and and of course Thomas Moore's melodies were really popular in Europe too. His
music got around. Back to Mayo, your father has an interest in music. Any other members of the family that played from the county here?
Well, actually my grandparents who lived here in the house, my grandfather sang, and he would have had a lot of like poems, really long poems, you know. And he sang a bit, like I always remember as a child, his kind of part piece was Skibbereen. So we're not talking Outstanding singing, but I always remember him singing that one in particular. But he did a good few songs. And then his brother played the melodeon and the tin whistle, and one of his favourites was the Belfast hornpipe, which is I think it was a fashion thing at the time. But they used to play a bit here, but like they wouldn't have gone out and about playing as such, you know. So they're like, but they did play, and it's funny because my mother didn't play at all.
Wow,
but she could name any tune.
So the music was in
it obviously, exactly.
Or do you know anything about the locality here, this beautiful part of the country? Like is there any local musicians that kind of your father or your...
No, there doesn't seem to have been really in this exact pocket, you know. Like there were... No, I mean they would have mostly been down in Ball, like the sessions and stuff they would have gone to, but there was no specific. Well, now in Clonmorris, I mean this is now not way back, but Matty Coyne, you probably remember Matty.
Matty Coyne.
And Johnny Cleary.
Well, Johnny Cleary, I know,
The branch in Clonmorris was kind of named after them, the Coldest branch. They were playing like Matty Cleary was playing the accordion, then Matty Coyne played the fiddle. You probably remember Darren McCallick. Do you remember Darren? And he used to play tin whistle, but this was his grandfather anyway. So they were really supportive of like the local sessions. You know, we'd go in, I'm sure you could hardly play a tune, like, but they'd sit there for the night, the two of them, and like Johnny Cleary passed away now kind of earlier on, but Matty, like, he'd sit there with all these kids and just like playing away, you know, and he was great. I think like that part of that, you know, seeing the older generation, I think that's one of the lovely things about the music is that like there was no kind of distinction, like it didn't seem beneath him to play with a bunch of kids, you know.
And there was nothing, it doesn't seem wrong, it doesn't seem out of place.
No.
It seemed very natural but also young kids are it's such an encouragement for them to see someone, a mature person,
you kind of see
showing interest in them.
And of course Seamus Duffy, like he's not close to this area, but I mean he's used to be my father was going through old photos there over lockdown, passing the time basically, and came across all these photos from the Ballyglass Sports, you know. And over there, it's like we were playing the tin whistles and Seamus is writing his adjudication or whatever, you know. But Seamus was, and he would have been very supportive as well of, you know, the youngsters, like bringing people onto the radio show and all that kind of.
Yeah, he'd have been a great ambassador for local musicians. Like he'd have really pushed them and kind of played them on the radio and stuff.
Exactly, I'd be always supporting kind of. Yeah. But I don't know of any like in this exact area. Like I know over in Ballindine there was Delia Flanagan, Mrs. Flanagan. She was there, but I don't know when exactly she would have been there now. But I have a recording of her which Bernie gave me, actually Bernie Geraghty, of like she would have been interviewed, kind of recorded for a radio thing, not a CD now. But I'm not sure when she died now or anything, but she has kind of unique versions of the tunes as well. You know?
Lovely, yeah.
But I think in Claremorris, Johnny Cleary and Matty, well, they were sort of knock side, but they we call them Claremorris, you know.
And by knowing some of these characters as you do, when you mention some great names, could you honestly say you can identify a Mayo style, for instance?
It's hard. I don't know really, because I think there is a Mayo style, sort of East Mayo, like Matty Joe, not Paddy Joe's playing, and then Alan Morris Rowe, that kind of area. That's a definite style to me now. I mean, you know more because you've actually played the accordion. But
the house dancing type, melodic type music.
That kind of. And they have like particular versions of tunes, but it's hard to know because I don't know. Like I suppose as well nowadays people's styles can be so influenced, like by other areas, like
nowadays, but I wonder, and again it's because we're both under 3 years of age, it's hard to know, but then because of internet, because of technology, as you said, it's become one generic kind of, we're influenced by each other, other parts of the country.
I wonder, I mean I try to think, because I know like in that accordion playing, but it's very like bouncy and very rhythmic. Then like, say I know Matty Coyne, like when he was playing the fiddle, it would have been very kind of, like a lot of bowing and
so it would be lively and kind of
but I don't know, I wouldn't know enough to be able to say is that really a style.
Like when we're talking about styles, we talk about like what's very evident about with the Johnny Gall music or Kelly music. It's very
so that's very clear cut. But then of course, like if you think about it, like Johnny Gall is very much up out there.
It's the extreme
like East Mayo, like between say like people like Brendan Tonra, is he Mayo or Sligo? Like half the time they call him the Sligo musician, and then they say, oh, he's from Mayo. It's like,
yes, of course, and even Kevin Henry or even people that lived on the borders. Matt Malloy maybe. And we're that part of Mayo, East Mayo, is very close to Sligo, Roscommon, even
but
Galway.
Like Kevin Henry as well would have that really bouncy kind of rhythmic. So maybe that's, I don't know. I mean, they're not certainly like like Sligo style generally is seen as having a lot more ornamentation and stuff, which I wouldn't really associate that with like that East Mayo.
It'd be more straightforward maybe, and kind of less kind of rhythmical.
But it's because like where the boundaries are, like I suppose in the past, in a way making the boundary by county mightn't even be that realistic, because there could be like some hill in the middle of a county.
Of course.
But even like this composers, like tunes that are composed, is it Tommy Cohen? Is that right? These tunes that are played everywhere, or like Christmas Eve, it's not composed by.
That's Tommy Cohen.
Where people would never think, oh, that's a Mayo tune. Everybody plays it like. And
But even John McGrath below in Rossford.
Like, that's the other person I was trying to think of.
He'd have written a lot of tunes and maybe not credited half the time, but because he was hanging around with Michael Coleman and James Morrison. The two boys gets a lot of credit. So, but also McFadden in Westport, for instance, like there's a lot of documentation where he's on paper he's from County Monaghan or from County Galway, but he's never mentioned as a Mayo musician. So same with Kevin or with some of these other Brendan Tonra.
But it's kind of like, I know in Emer Mayock's project, the music of Mayo, like there's so many of these tunes, like even the thing that we did, the series in May, and I was going through, and some of the tunes that were in there, I was like, I know that tune, but I never associated it with Mayo, until you look, then you find out the sources like that. I think maybe like same with the composing tunes, I'd say definitely there was an element, because even still you see that with some sort of old musicians, like Martin Mulhare, who just passed away there at the weekend, you know, and I was reading a thing on his website, you know, like where one of his brothers was saying that, you know, the brother used to play his tunes in sessions and stuff where Martin wouldn't own up to them, or wouldn't, not own up to them, but he wouldn't be telling people he composed them, like, you know, where people were kind of shy of putting themselves out there, you know, that they'd just maybe compose a tune, but they wouldn't necessarily be, it's not like now where it's all like royalties and this crap, like they nearly would see like they didn't want to be taken credit for it.
Or maybe it was no big deal, they didn't understand why the big fuss was about it, you know.
Yeah, I was just like, that's a tune.
That's a tune, so I made that up, what about it? Continue,
So it's, but I know it's interesting because, like, I suppose the fact that Michael Coleman, and there was so much emphasis on Sligo music, you could say, from those early recordings, whether that kind of just overshadowed. Actually, funnily enough, not connected to Mayo, but on the same lines as that, you know, the Neil collection, this 1724, like there's tunes in there by Carolyn, but his name is given as Signor Carolini in the book because the Italian fashion. I heard that story first. I was like, surely that's not true, and then I loved it. Saw it, you know. But that's gas.
And was that again was like just the fashion of the time.
It had to be,
it had to be, if it was Baroque influence music,
exactly.
it had to be Italian.
It's gas.
That's fantastic. No, it is,
But that's interesting about the name. And like even like we did a good few years ago now, myself and my husband were asked to do a concert. This woman, Kathy, that I mentioned, Philadelphia, this group, the Irish Centre, were putting on a series of concerts about connected with like different styles, Sligo style and whatever. And Kathy said, do you want to do something about Mayo music? And I was like, because nobody ever thinks of Mayo music like that. But we did, we put it together, actually we called it Music of Mayo, and we went through like some between like recent compositions like Paddy Mills, a few of those, back to the Bunting stuff, some Carolyn tunes were written for like Mayo patrons, this kind of stuff. And it was really some of the stuff that I discovered, stuff from like, do you know that collection Aroin Moy Shola? This woman she was from Tuam, and she collected all these songs in like the early 1900s and put a book together, Aroin Moy Shola, but of like local versions of songs. So the songs in there, like there's one called Ilon Adi, which is like from, but she was submitted by this doctor from Claremorris who collected it from some old man out the road kind of thing, and like submitted it. So there's like kind of versions, it's not just Mayo, it's like Mayo Galway kind of that area.
So the borders kind of
thing. But that, you know, was interesting there's different songs, but I thought that was really interesting, like to know the person in Claremorris who collected it from this old man, you know. But so there's those collections, but so when we went searching, like, because initially I was nearly going to say no, but you know yourself, you never say no to any gig that you're asked to do.
No, of course not. You'd be stupid after.
So when we went searching then, there were so many nice tunes, we've actually even kept them in the repertoire, like even just for normal concerts, we still do it, and be talking about Mayo and all that stuff. But one thing I think is really kind of that I kind of love the kind of connection, like Bernie Garrity taught me, I later then taught her kids the harp. But now she is teaching my daughter.
Wow.
You know.
So it's going over and back, over and back.
It's just lovely to have that kind of continuity, I think. And I mean, there's also people doing fantastic teaching in Castlebar, like John Kilkenny
fantastic.
and all up in Beaufield. Like, it's great to see how much music is in the county.
So music is strong, you think?
It's so strong.
Yeah.
But but I think it's really nice to have that connection. I think that resource, like the Music of Mayo, the site that Emer put together,
fantastic,
it's even great, like to have those tunes, to be able to say to kids, this is a tune from, like there's even those kind of Mayo polkas on there, do you know, I think, or which like nobody thinks of polkas in there, you know, or to be able to say like this was played by such one, it's just nice. Plus for some lovely compositions that I learned from that CD, that I kind of, I think John Carey had a few nice ones. Is it John? Joe Carey, like there's a few lovely tunes that I'd never heard before, you know, so it's nice to have even for ourselves, like tunes
of course.
And even like the songs, like, which I'm not a singer, so I don't know enough about it really, but like, you know, songs by, like there was all these poets and different characters in Mayo that would have, you know, been, I suppose, documenting their lives in poems and songs.
Of course, yeah. Like a lot of the great big Shannon songs of Connemara were Mayo songs.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's documented as well. Like some of them talk about South Mayo and Westport or that kind of part of the country. So, I mean, but it's amazing sometimes how there's so much this stuff taken from Mayo. Yeah. The people that taught Morrison and Coleman up in the north of Mayo were from Swinford, Kilmovee, that area, Charlestown. There were massive influences on the likes of Michael Coleman and James Morrison, yet
you never hear of them.
You never hear of them, the Towies, the Dixons and so on.
Yeah.
And also some great characters down through the years, like we mentioned Kevin Henry, one of my heroes, like a man in the States, and he's from Newcastle, right? He's on the Sligo Mayo border, you know. Yeah. The house might be in Sligo, but the post office is in Mayo.
Yeah, exactly. Same as Brendan Torres.
So you have that kind of, there's a county and a county, but then in between, on the line of the county, there's this kind of cross-county connection.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they have influences from both, you know. Yeah. And it's important to mention both, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Mayo Roscommon or Mayo Galway or whatever. Yeah. You know. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
I can't think of anything specifically. I suppose, no, I mean, like one thing that we're doing now, we're trying to, in the county, like Music Generation is doing a lot of stuff. We have a harp ensemble here now. I mean, when I started the harp, I imagined that we'd have an ensemble with 35 kids in Mayo. You know, I'd been like, that's crazy, like, you know, but it's fantastic, like even that's coming up along, and some really good players, but there's nothing, I mean, it's just great. I suppose the venues as well, like the Linenhall, I mean, I would have been at concerts there as a kid, you know, that would have been influenced me in terms of like, I can still remember some of the concerts I was at and how they were so fantastic. Do you know that kind of way?
And inspired you to go on and do your own.
Exactly,
That's lovely, yeah.